Khenpo Sodargye.Udāna
The supreme, profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning, to liberate beings. Please generate bodhicitta before teaching. We will continue studying the Udāna Sūtra. As for the Udāna Sūtra at present, we have already covered 4 chapters previously. Today we should actually now begin with the 5th chapter. The 5th chapter is specifically called the chapter on attachment. As for this truly profound Buddhist scripture, it is indeed very significant. It's hard to say right now how long we will spend on it. However, it is a possibility there might be a written test at that particular time. I wanted to let everyone know about this. Roughly speaking, we will have a written test covering several chapters. Which specific chapters will be included hasn't been decided yet. I will ask about it when the time comes. I'll seek the opinions of the Khenpos and Khenmos. Generally speaking, if there are more chapters, the chapter on impermanence, the chapter on vigilance, and the chapter on attachment. If there are more, these 3 chapters, if fewer than just 2 chapters, this will also depend on the situation at the time. The exam includes explanation of the verses. We will also be a bit flexible when setting the test. We can't just test on some very unusual phrases for the questions. That might be a bit too difficult. But at the least, it should test your understanding of the verse, whether through Q&A or explanations. So I truly hope that all of us, indeed everyone studying the Udāna Varga, should have a comprehensive exam at the end of the year. Although taking examinations is rather challenging, and it certainly does create some significant pressure, having some pressure is actually quite beneficial for ourselves. I'm the same way myself. If I didn't have to teach, maybe I would be a bit more relaxed too. If I said I was sick, or that I wasn't feeling well, or I was unhappy, and left like that, it would be easier for me. But having things easy isn't necessarily beneficial for us. So as human beings, truly, we need to have a certain sense of compulsion, and we still need to have some pressure on ourselves. Only then do we have motivation. That way things might turn out better. Otherwise, even if we study, if there are no exams at all, some individuals would probably still study on their own initiative. But according to my recent observations, as well as feedback from others, there are also quite a few individuals who might not be particularly self-disciplined. When it comes to our oral Dharma presentation, sometimes I truly feel that we shouldn't set overly high expectations for everyone. A moderate standard is sufficient. I genuinely think that since we have an entire night in between our sessions, you will also have ample opportunity to thoroughly review the material the following day, because all of you are exceptionally young, incredibly lively, and remarkably sharp-witted individuals at this stage. But for many people, whether it's reading case studies or other things, things don't always go very smoothly in many aspects. When it comes time to look at some lecture notes, people just have a rough idea about it. Plus, among us, if there are some judgments and detailed analyses about these verses, that would be better, but most people basically don't really have them either. There are also a few individuals who look at other things. For example, in other scriptures, including yesterday, there was one from the Bodhisattva Bhumi Shastra, talked about categories, non-negligence, and also discussed some of their essence. So there are also some references and citations from other scriptural sources as well. But the most important thing, our realization and understanding of these teachings is important. What I'm more concerned about is your personal perspective. What kind of valuable insights you truly have about this verse and how it personally helps you when combined with your own mental continuum. This might be even more important. When we undertake our studies in the past, during the time when I was actively engaged in teaching, sometimes among our attentive audience, there were some people with relatively high levels of understanding, but they still seemed to have trouble explaining. But now, in this setting, some people explain things very well, while others give average explanations. No matter what, everyone is happy to learn together. And that's a very good thing. Sometimes we even use certain terms incorrectly, and I make mistakes myself. I sometimes confuse non-negligence and negligence. Sometimes I genuinely mean to articulate the word non-negligence in my mind, but what frequently comes out of my mouth is negligence, implying a lack of care. Or in my mind, I'm often thinking the sensible idea of go to bed early and get up late. No, that's not what I mean in my mind, but I end up saying get up early and go to bed late. Sometimes things like this happen, but that's okay. Everyone makes slips of the tongue. It happens from time to time. So when we are speaking, we still need to be a little bit more careful and precise with our words. That would be better. So today, let's continue discussing the chapter on attachment. The scripture is truly excellent. I hope that everyone present here not only truly understands it from the Chinese cultural perspective, but can also explain it very well and clearly in the Tibetan language. Otherwise, since everyone here is Tibetan, if we can only speak Chinese and not Tibetan, that's not really ideal either. So for some individuals, perhaps due to their environment or their specific educational background at the time, there might be some very special reasons for this certain situation. Some people are also relatively more fluent when speaking in Chinese. Some have never attended school at all. I've also read everyone's introductions. Some of you are self-taught. If you're self-taught, that's really impressive too. For those who have never been to school, if you can basically speak Chinese, that's already quite good. But no matter what the situation is, when we are explaining something, we can consider both aspects. This is quite important. Today we are discussing the 5th chapter, the chapter on attachment. As for the chapter on attachment, actually earlier in our discussion we talked about the significant chapter on vigilance. Regarding vigilance, it is extremely important in Buddhism, because only through vigilance can all virtues and roots of goodness arise. This was mentioned. However, some people, even though they genuinely wish to be diligent and practice well in their hearts, and truly want to be someone who can act for the benefit of others, if their inner attachment and inherent desire are not completely severed and eliminated, it is indeed very difficult to truly achieve this profound spiritual state. Therefore, for a dedicated practitioner, deep attachment is the greatest obstacle, because if it taints one's mental continuum, no Dharma practice can be sustained, and ultimately one cannot attain liberation in this world. So it's not enough for us to just talk about being vigilant and not being negligent. That's still not sufficient. If you truly cling to a certain person or a certain thing in your heart, any form of attachment here is not limited to objects of the opposite sex. It could be your partner, your parents, your wife, children, husband, or other relatives, as well as good friends. And in this world, even your beloved computer, car, or house. Even great masters like Patrul Rinpoche had similar experiences. He was especially fond of a wooden bowl, yet he too had to overcome this attachment to achieve spiritual liberation. Some time ago I got a wooden bowl myself. I used it for a while. Then someone said it really wasn't good. Then I started to feel negative about it. Then someone else gave me another wooden bowl. I thought this wooden bowl was especially nice. But just yesterday a Khenpo said this one wasn't good, that it wasn't convenient for adding tsampa inside. When I looked, it really did feel like it wasn't easy to use. So this kind of attachment applies to anything. Sometimes it seems like you like it, and sometimes you don't like it. That's the kind of feeling you get. So the attachment mentioned here, even if it's just a wooden bowl, or your personal phone, or your cherished prayer beads, or any of your various important things, or your deep and abiding love for your beloved pet, your deep love for your magnificent elephant, your fine horse, and so on and so forth, all sorts of things. As long as there is this kind of attachment, then in reality you're trapped in samsara. You truly cannot attain liberation. So here the main point is to explain this principle. During our process of study, everyone should also analyze it carefully and earnestly. At first glance, each verse seems so simple, and there doesn't seem to be much to it. But if you really use stories and literal explanations, and then expand and analyze them further, there is actually a lot to discuss. Originally, I thought each day covering about 20 verses shouldn't be a problem. I could explain them simply to everyone. But later, when I actually faced the teaching material, it seemed I couldn't go on like that. So in the end, there wasn't really anything to rush about. I'll just cover as much as I can. If my life's sustained, I'll finish the teaching. If my life cannot be sustained, then wherever I get to, that's where I'll stop. Each and every one of us should truly have a deep and abiding kind of awareness of impermanence. I noticed at the end of the Udāna Sūtra, there's a line that says, "The ignorant one has no wisdom and behaves as though death does not exist." This means that the foolish who lack wisdom seem to behave in such a way, as if death will never come to them at all. But the wise are different. The wise realize the true Dharma. The wise have thoroughly understood the true Dharma. There is another line after that, but I can't recall it right now. Anyway, in chapter 22 of the Udāna, there's a verse that goes like this. So if most people were to gain insight into the Buddha's teachings, we should have very good and thoughtful planning for our own future prospects and our lives in general moving forward. If you don't understand the Dharma, it's like we simply won't ever die, you know. Every day we are revolving in a constant, unwavering wrong views of permanence and purity every day. So whatever the case may be, if we all study this chapter on attachment effectively, if we learn it well, perhaps through such study and contemplation, attachment within mind stream can be eliminated. If that's the case, it really could be very, very important and highly significant. Now, regarding this particular and crucial section on attachment, we will delve deeper. Attachment gives rise to all kinds of distress. Attachment gives rise to all kinds of fear. If one can let go of all attachments, there will be no distress and no fear. This verse is just like that. Attachment gives rise to distress. Attachment gives rise to fear. If one can let go of these attachments, then there will be absolutely no fear and no distress. This is indeed the main point being discussed. There is also a very related story in our commentary. It happened in the ancient city of Shravasti. There was a very handsome and exceptionally charming man named Shizi. He also had an exceptionally beautiful wife named Shinu, who was also incredibly attractive. They loved each other and sharing a profound connection. Later, after 6 months, something unfortunate happened. For unknown reasons, the man sadly and finally passed away. After the man died, the woman was deeply heartbroken. In the end, she completely went mad. She ran around naked everywhere, frantically searching and wandering aimlessly. She was constantly in pain. At this time, the Buddha realized that the conditions for her to be truly liberated had indeed fully matured. So, with a compassionate heart, he took his disciple Ananda with him to see the distressed woman. The woman was running around everywhere, frantically rushing about in a chaotic manner. At that very moment, when she saw the serene presence of the Buddha, she naturally and immediately regained her sanity and composure. She felt a sense of shame within herself. At that particular time, Venerable Ananda, since she had just been running around completely naked, Ananda then offered her his own monastic robe. When Ananda gave her the robe, the Buddha taught her the Dharma, as is mentioned in our commentaries. The general meaning is that if you do not abandon one attachment, you will be bound by desire. May you be able to completely eradicate this dreadful ignorance. If you can truly cut off even one attachment, you will find profound liberation. But if you do not, the love and attachment of the world will bind you. I hope you can eradicate this especially terrifying love or profound ignorance. At this point, the Buddha handed the alms bowl to Venerable Ananda and specifically told him to find a household where no one had ever died and bring back some food from that unique place. Venerable Ananda took the alms bowl and, relying on the Buddha's power, in a very short time he went to many, it is said as many as 140 million households to search, but he never found one. In the end, Ananda returned empty-handed, bringing back the empty alms bowl. Then, regarding this empty bowl, the compassionate Buddha thoughtfully recited this profound and meaningful verse to the empty bowl. That's one version of the story. Some people say that this verse was spoken in a household where the wife and children, all the family members had died. The Buddha spoke this verse in response to this situation because attachment is terrifying. Anyway, the verse goes like this. Others say that it actually happened in the ancient city of Vaishali, or perhaps somewhere else where there was a prominent individual named Lichavi, and the Buddha himself spoke this profound verse to those assembled people. There are different versions of the story. But regardless, in reality, here it is indeed through this particular attachment, whether it is a tangible or an intangible form of attachment, whenever the human mind becomes especially troubled and persistently clings to a particular object or idea, often due to an intense emotional attachment, there inevitably arises an irrational and deeply ingrained fixation. Whether it is towards people or things, no matter to whom, it is an irrational mental attitude. So, if there is attachment, what does it give rise to? It frequently gives rise to worry, sorrow, and a deep sense of sadness. Many individuals across the world are experiencing this situation right now. At the same time, they may intensely feel sorrow regarding the events of the past, and a fear concerning the uncertainties of the present, or even a sense of fear about the future, because generally speaking, this pervasive fear might be caused by our enemies. But in actual reality, the very objects of our deep attachment also bring us a profound sense of fear. So, the cherished objects of our profound and emotional attachment, whether they are among sentient beings, such as our parents, our partners, or indeed our very own precious children, or the cherished elders in your family. If you truly love animals, it could encompass all kinds of creatures, including cats, dogs, pigs, and many more. If it's not sentient beings, it could be things like elephants, wealth, and all sorts of things. As long as you are attached to these things, all kinds of suffering will arise. If you can skillfully use wisdom to cut off and completely let go of this attachment, then naturally any attachment to anything in the three realms will dissolve. If you can just cut it off, then in this entire world, there truly won't be this kind of sorrow. If you don't have this kind of fear. Relatively speaking, in this particular world, if someone doesn't have a particularly strong emotional attachment or deep feeling of love, then no matter what kind of adverse conditions they encounter, that person is more relaxed, at least their mindset is more at ease. Now, most people, the vast majority of individuals living in our modern world back around the year 2017, including in the United Kingdom and France, of course, the actual statistics do vary considerably. But in some reports, it was said that according to statistics, among every 10 people on average, 5 or 6 of them, a significant number, actually have various psychological phobias or suffer from depression or anxiety disorders. Such phenomena are actually quite common. Recently I saw that according to official data from the Chinese Academy of Sciences, among young people, approximately 25% have varying degrees of depression. This statistic is also very alarming and concerning. In fact, whether it's all these cases of depression or unhealthy mindsets, ultimately it's because we are too attached to people and things. The more attachment, we trap ourselves like a silkworm spinning its own cocoon, the more painful it becomes. Many doctors prescribe all kinds of medications for depression to their patients. Of course, when it comes to medication, we can't say that it doesn't work. But at the most fundamental level, if we look at Buddhist practices, the practice of selflessness or altruism, or simply not being attached to anything and just meditating, for example, then this should have a significant effect on reducing our mental attachment, which is a fundamental aspect of our practice. So for all practitioners, this is also an extremely crucial and profoundly significant principle. If we don't have this and we remain attached to love and desire in the cycle of life and death, everything is indeed extremely painful and filled with suffering. What is it that we cannot obtain? Liberation. There is a famous verse in the Ekotara Agama that states, "Upon seeing forms, one becomes deeply attached." When we see forms, we become attached. We cycle through birth and death, never finding liberation. We endlessly caught in cycle of samsara without liberation. On the other hand, if someone ultimately can truly achieve this goal of spiritual practice and is not deeply attached to their own children or cherished sons or their devoted partner, if they are free from such attachment, they will also feel very relaxed and quite comfortable. Master Hanshan was one of the 4 great monks of the Ming dynasty at that very time. He somehow unwittingly got himself involved with the imperial palace. It seemed that the Empress Dowager had great faith in the teachings of Buddhism. As for the emperor, there were also various influential ministers among them who would often say all sorts of divisive and inflammatory things about them. They claimed he was disrespectful toward Taoism. And in the end, Master Hanshan was exiled by them to what is now the Guangdong region in China, which at that time was considered a remote and barbarous land, because in the past criminals were often sent there. At that time, although they were really quite unwilling to exile the Dharma master to Guangdong, due to significant pressure from the royal family, everyone present had no choice but to send him away. When Master Hanshan was sent away by them, he had to pass through many different places on the way. Eventually he arrived at what is now Nanjing, I believe. While he was in that particular area, he unexpectedly encountered his own mother on the flowing river. In fact, his mother was a very cultivated person. When she met him, she looked extremely joyful, and her voice was especially loud and clear indeed. It was as if she wasn't suffering at all. At that time, Hanshan said, "Now that I'm facing such great difficulties, are you so unaffected by this? You appear so calm and natural in your demeanor." His mother then replied, "Haven't you also been practicing for a long time? Most of my entire life has already passed by, I feel, and I may not have much time left in this world, but I have never felt any real distress about my own life at all, nor have I been attached to you or anything else. I hope that when you go there, you will practice diligently. Perhaps we two, mother and son, may not be able to see each other in this lifetime, but even if we don't, it doesn't matter." At that time, she was very cheerful and gave him this one final, deeply meaningful and sacred blessing. Later, Master Hanshan also said, "If all the mothers in the world were like my mother, then the suffering of being trapped in samsara would be greatly reduced, almost non-existent." So among people in this world, some parents may seem to be ordinary, average people with no special qualities, but the profound love they truly have for their children at a certain point can also be greatly lessened through spiritual practice and cultivation. So here it is said that no matter whether it is towards people or things, if you develop attachment to any object, it will inevitably bring you all kinds of suffering. For us ordinary people in the world, this is definitely something that we don't really agree with, because in any given situation, whether it's with our phones or with television and movies, in so many of them, they always say, "Oh, how truly, really great love is indeed." For the sake of love, anything can be sacrificed. With this kind of education, and under such a cultural background, many people grow up thinking that love should be something purely and eternally joyful and fulfilling. This is how they think it should look. But in actual reality, the profound suffering it brings to each and every person is truly beyond words to adequately describe. So perhaps among many cultivated Buddhists, some people have indeed gained some insight. They come to realize that in fact people in the world use beautiful and truly moving language to praise it, using endearing words to extol it, and so on. But in reality, when you actually come into direct contact with it, it's not at all like those incredibly ornate and elaborate words on the outside that are often used to lavishly praise and commend it. In fact, deeply hidden behind its facade, there are also many kinds of suffering, anxiety and sorrow unknown to people that lie hidden deep within their hearts. This is truly probably something everyone should definitely be aware of. Although in many of our society's mainstream cultural frameworks, they never talk about how such attachment brings all kinds of difficulties to sentient beings. This is true for Easterners as well, and it's the same for Westerners. Especially for Westerners, just as we discussed earlier, they greatly praise greed, delusion, and anger. These particular emotions are all highly praised. Because of this reason, many people are also unhappy, but there's nothing they can do about it, because they simply don't know where the true root cause lies. This relates directly to what we mentioned earlier, that profound joy often gives rise to deep sorrow, and joy can also give rise to fear. If one is truly free from any attachment to fleeting joy, there will be neither sorrow nor fear to contend with. This particular verse is basically quite similar, but there are also some differences in the specific wording and phrasing. From attachment to women arise anxiety, suffering, and fear. Should the beloved woman alter, grief shall be born. This verse truly reflects the actual situation of modern men and women. Loving a woman brings sorrow, pain, and fear. And if your beloved changes or leaves, your heart will inevitably be filled with deep sadness. This significant event mainly happened in the ancient city of Shravasti during Buddha's time. At that time there lived a Brahmin. He was blessed with 2 sons and also possessed 4 cows. And he also possessed a substantial piece of land as well in that area. But later a severe hailstorm struck the area, causing significant damage. What was meant to die died, and what was meant to be destroyed was destroyed. Everything was destroyed. Later, when his wife was doing some housework, she seemed to have tragically fallen from the wall. After she fell, she also sadly died. After she died, the master was extremely heartbroken and deeply grieved. It seems that in India, people truly often went mad due to trauma and ran naked. So in our academy before, people who were mentally unstable were still considered okay. Basically, there were very few individuals who actually ran around completely naked. It was still acceptable. In ancient India, they would often do so because after going completely mad, and India is also a hot country, perhaps that's why they would run around entirely naked. At that time, it was especially pitiful wandering everywhere at that moment. The conditions for the Buddha to save him had already fully matured and were perfectly ripe. Then, at that opportune moment, the Buddha spoke this profound verse. So the literal meaning here is actually mainly about some intense sufferings that are intrinsically related to the experience of love. Because of the deep and sometimes overwhelming suffering that inevitably comes with love, the emotional suffering directly related to love, especially if it's a man, he develops this kind of love for a woman. Because in this story, it's mainly about developing a deep love for his cherished wife. It could also be for this very reason. If it's a woman, she develops a profound love for her devoted husband or for a particular man. So what exactly does this bring? It brings deep worry, profound sorrow, and great affliction. Outwardly, on the surface, it truly seems like this is a very happy and positive thing. When you love someone, whether it's a man or a woman, or whatever the case may be, love in all its forms seems wonderful. Of course, the love we're talking about here can also be compassionate love, as described in Mahayana Buddhism, such as loving kindness toward parents and all sentient beings. But this should be the same as what was mentioned earlier. It's a great selfless love, not a selfish kind of love. Selfish love is truly love for the sake of one's own personal self. This kind of love is also quite frightening. That's why it consequently leads to feelings of significant worry and emotional distress. Perhaps in the past it was worry, now it is suffering. And in the future it becomes fear. Why is it suffering now? It's just as we will discuss below. When people with this kind of love gather together, it seems that being together doesn't feel right. And not being together truly doesn't feel right either. There are all sorts of conflicts, profound suffering, and intricate entanglements, indeed so many kinds of suffering. In the future, this also leads to all kinds of deep-seated fears and persistent worries about it, such as being afraid of others being together and so on. All these different kinds of suffering, and also all of these various different things. If the woman or man you truly love changes, as explained in the commentary, means if she dies, she leaves this world. or she runs off with someone else, or she embarks on a journey abroad, or whatever the specific situation may be, your heart becomes especially troubled, deeply distressed and sorrowful. This emotional state arises quite naturally as a direct consequence of these circumstances. So this truly so-called love, this feeling, actually brings profound worries and immense suffering into our lives, and it is quite frightening and deeply unsettling. This phenomenon is not exclusively found in Buddhism. For example, the teachings of Christianity also explicitly state, saying that God specifically instructed Adam and Eve, who were then living in a state of perfect well-being within the beautiful paradise, not to consume the forbidden apple. This particular narrative is one of several significant stories found within the Christian faith tradition, which are also actually quite interesting. Don't eat the apple. You should really live well in paradise. Later, the demon Mara turned into a poisonous snake, and then he truly harmed them. When he genuinely harmed them, they naturally developed intense greed and strong attachment, and the strong, undeniable desire to eat the forbidden apple arose within them. Subsequently, Adam and Eve gradually developed a deep attachment to each other, and after God eventually discovered this significant development, they were expelled from paradise and came to the world. When they came to the world, they became the ancestors of humankind. That's where it all truly began. Actually, this is a relatively common and widely accepted explanation in the Western world as well. In this story, because of greed and the desire to eat apples. In fact, in the rich tapestry of Tibetan region history, we also have many detailed accounts where, at the very beginning of human civilization and existence, people didn't really have much greed or desire. All the crops grew naturally on their own. But later on, some people developed greed for the oil floating on the water. After enjoying it, their bodies became heavier and heavier. Their bodies lost their radiance and they entered the realm of desire, and so on. Anyway, perhaps the explanations are quite similar indeed. Of course, the theory of evolution is actually quite unreliable, really, in many respects. Many of them definitely and quite clearly follow the current popular and widely accepted explanations. This includes some famous books that are available nowadays which are entirely dedicated to these concepts. They are based on the viewpoints of evolution theory. But this is just really a mere kind of imagination. Most people in the world truly believe that humans evolved from animals through mutation into human beings, and then humans became increasingly intelligent. But we can also, for example, whether it's actually the current human civilizations, many ancient thoughts and wisdom, when we compare them, we should be able to very clearly perceive whether humans are actually getting dumber or getting smarter. This can be observed in many aspects. So here, regardless of which one it is, whether it's the Eastern or Western explanation, in fact, this greed of ours has brought about what exactly? It has just brought all kinds of fears, insecurities, or even some sadness. These are truly very, very real. If we look at our actual own real lives, many people, including some of us monastics, do not possess an excessive quantity of luxury items, nor do we genuinely require them for our daily existence. Whether it pertains to our sustenance, such as food, or our attire, like clothing, including what the Buddha said, extra clothing needs to be specially blessed. There shouldn't be any excess, whether it's bowls or the 3 robes. So this is a way of life that doesn't fall into either extreme and is indeed actually very well suitable and beneficial for human beings to thrive. If one is too wealthy, there is really no time for any study or meditation. If one is too poor, it's impossible to sustain life. So the Buddhist view of a truly very moderate lifestyle is actually understood by many wise people nowadays. They are quite clear about this. At this time, your inherent greed and any strong attachment you may possess can also be restrained and brought under control. So in this context, what exactly is being discussed here? It is fundamentally about how intense craving and attachment bring about a significant amount of related suffering and distress. If all sentient beings in the 6 realms of the world do not indulge in lust, then they will not be subject to the cycle of birth and death. Last year we studied the Shurangama Sutra. The Shurangama Sutra itself is also about the relationship between Matangi's daughter and Ananda. Buddha and Manjushri Bodhisattva specifically emphasized the profound need to actively counteract negative impulses like lust and greed, the diverse sentient beings residing in the 6 realms of our intricate world. If their minds are free from lust, if their minds are not lustful, then they will certainly not follow any afflictions at all. And the cycle of birth and death will not continue. This is how it works. Only in this way is there a chance for liberation.
In fact, we sentient beings of the 6 realms, I'm not sure how I explained it at the time, but in the Udāna Sūtra, it says that if the minds of sentient beings in the 6 realms are not lustful, perhaps this seed exists in their alaya consciousness deep within their hearts. Otherwise, else. The acts of lust by beings in hell and the hungry ghost realm, per the Abhidharma Kosha, it should be, there is no such thing in hell, but in the Udāna Sūtra, it is stated that if the minds in the 6 realms are not lustful, the lust meant does not necessarily mean actual misconduct, but maybe it refers to the arising of a mind of craving and attachment. I'm not sure how it was explained at the time. So what we are talking about here mainly refers to this kind of craving and attachment. And any form of craving and attachment is not very good either. The ascetic practice is not to stay in the same tree hollow for 3 nights, right? In the past, there was someone who said, if we are practicing the 12 ascetic practices, it's best not to stay in the same place for more than 3 nights. The idea is that in any matter, one shouldn't stay in one place for too long. Otherwise, it's very easy to develop a strong attachment. Some of our profound mind training practices also clearly mention this important point, right? So whether it's towards people or towards a Dharma center, if you stay in one particular place for a very long period of time, you might develop some attachment to that place. And in the end, it might not be beneficial for yourself either. In the past, whether it was the great masters of the Kadampa tradition or some practitioners in Han Chinese regions, actually, in some specific parts of ancient Han China, there truly were many excellent and skilled practitioners. But as for Han Chinese Buddhism, whether it's the Pure Land School or Chan, Zen school, what is lacking is a step-by-step approach to practice. For example, specifically in Chinese Buddhism, although perhaps it's not entirely accurate to say it this way, in most places lack a systematic progression. As for this systematic and gradual progression, indeed, in our Tibetan Buddhism, there are preliminary, main, and concluding practices, especially the preliminaries like contemplating the rarity and impermanence of human life. Once matured in these, once your own mind stream has basically matured, then it becomes much easier to accept the higher teachings. But if it's not like this, and you start right away with the most profound teachings, most people simply cannot truly accept these very things in any way indeed, because your mind stream matures gradually, step by step, when the time is right. Only then can you talk about some of the deeper teachings. So we are also very supportive of Chinese Buddhism. However, in some educational institutions and schools, their step-by-step approach to practical application and practice is somewhat lacking. But they also possess many scattered teachings and fragmented lessons, especially within the profound Chan Zen tradition. There are also some insightful pith instructions to point directly to the very essence of the mind itself. This particular approach is considered to be exceptionally beneficial and highly effective. Following this, we will delve into a discussion about the various sufferings, worries, sighs, and laments of the entire world. All these things arise from attachment. Without any attachment whatsoever, they simply do not exist. The main and crucial point here is that in the distant past, a wise Brahmin once respectfully asked the enlightened Buddha, saying, "Venerable Gautama, what precisely gives rise to profound sorrow and deep suffering, as well as lamentation and unhappiness that sentient beings experience?" At that moment, the compassionate Buddha thoughtfully responded to these crucial questions by teaching this verse. The meaning is indeed that all kinds of various suffering in the world are truly not just one or two, but many. The main point here is that, besides the attachment we mentioned earlier, there are also all sorts of other sufferings. Within our minds, there are all kinds of suffering and emotional distress. We also experience various kinds of suffering in our bodies. There is a great deal of immense suffering in this world. Each person probably has their own kinds of suffering as well. Some suffer from headaches, some suffer from stomach aches, And some, although their bodies are generally fine, may suffer from the pain of growing desires. Some people experience all sorts of fears and anxieties, all kinds of different sufferings. The suffering of sentient beings is boundless and limitless. There is so much of it. And then there are all sorts of worries and deep sighs. When it truly comes to these worries and heartfelt sighs, the heart feels especially sorrowful and burdened. Some of this emotion is expressed through involuntary sighs in our speech, lamenting sighs, sorrowful sighs, these types of grief-filled sighs. There are also cries of lamentation, some of which are expressed verbally through spoken words. Sometimes the suffering is so incredibly intense that people cry out in agonizing pain endlessly. All of these various kinds of human suffering, some that words can capture and others that defy description. It really does seem that sentient beings, each and every person, if you truly get to know them, except for those individuals who have cultivated themselves exceptionally well, harbors many profound and unspeakable pains deep within their hearts. All of these accumulated sufferings, in fact, are often the direct result of love being deeply wounded, whether it's the attachment to one's own body or the deep and strong attachment to material possessions that rightfully belong to oneself. It is because of this love that the concept of mine arises. With the attachment to mine, one continues to endlessly drift in the perpetual cycle of samsara. So all of this love, all of this deep suffering are intimately related to love. If we were to truly let go of such a powerful love, then the suffering of the world would truly not exist. So what we are actually talking about here today, compared to what worldly people say, is really completely the opposite on many issues. Because the world believes that with love comes happiness, joy, profound value and deep meaning, among other essential aspects of human existence. If there is no love, then living in this world becomes utterly meaningless. It is empty, wasted, and so on. They say things like this. So which is truly real, what the Buddha taught or what worldly people say? This is something we should observe and determine for ourselves. Perhaps for those of us who became monastics from a young age, growing up within the Buddha's teachings, and living or maturing in such an environment, we may not be especially familiar with it ourselves, as a result, therefore, with all the worldly praise and glorification. But then again, it's hard to say, because in today's world, many truly profound and significant various stages of generation and completion, as well as the state of dzogchen, which should exist, are actually very rare in our mental continuum, while all kinds of greed, anger, and ignorance that shouldn't be there, or these negative concepts and habits from the outside world, may have filled our hearts instead. In this particular case, it may appear, at least on the surface, that we are practitioners or Buddhists, but in reality, we are occupied by all sorts of worldly attachments and all kinds of chaotic worldly knowledge, which have already taken up space in our minds for some time now. That is very painful and also very frightening. So sometimes when we observe ourselves, indeed, in principle, as practitioners, we should be making progress day by day, making progress every year, every month, and even every single day. But not only is there no progress, sometimes even I myself, when I observe my own mental continuum, back when I first came here and relied on a spiritual teacher, whether it was compassion, renunciation, or bodhicitta, in all aspects there seemed to be at least a little bit of additional progress. But now it seems not only is there no even any progress, but there are even signs of regression. Perhaps it's actually because of indulging in numerous offerings or being quite completely distracted by all various and other mundane everyday affairs which cloud the mind. As a result, over time, our spiritual resolve gradually diminishes. This could very well be the case. If that's so, when many practitioners truly examine themselves, they find that they haven't made any progress. And instead, if they are regressing like this, it's actually quite pitiable. In principle, we should truly be reaching higher states of being and consciousness. This is indeed very much important. In fact, this attachment and suffering should be a cause and effect relationship. If there is attachment, then suffering is its result. It's just like the relationship between a seed and a sprout. Or people all over the world truly think that love is something very, very good indeed. But in reality, love and hatred exist simultaneously. Even worldly people say this: the more you truly love, the more you might intensely hate, or indeed the more you might deeply suffer. On the surface, it certainly seems like it's something genuinely good and positive, something that should bring you happiness and joy. But in reality, love has brought me endless harm. Since beginningless time, it has harmed us countless times. Even the attachment in this life is truly and profoundly frightening as well. In the distant past, a learned scholar once respectfully asked the esteemed Master Lianqi, a revered figure, "I've read many of your writings on abstaining from killing and releasing living beings, and I've read a lot of them. I also think they're very good. I can also manage to do some of these things myself, including abstaining from killing, releasing living beings, and being vegetarian. I am able to do some of these things. But as for my nature, it is such that I am really very prone to greed, so I find it truly impossible to give up my greed." Why is that? Because harming others and killing living beings are truly tragic things, and I'm willing to give them up. But when it comes to attachment and desire, it is something that brings happiness, so I am unwilling to give up this kind of pleasure. This was later said by Master Lianqi. I remember when I read it before. It really resonated with me. Many of us might not understand this. He gave an example. He said to that scholar, "Let me give you an example. For instance, imagine there's a poison and it's added to some not so good food. You'd think that the food wasn't tasty to begin with. Then with poison, it's even worse. So, under normal circumstances, you absolutely wouldn't want to accept it. But if this dangerous poison is carefully mixed into something especially delicious, perhaps a truly delightful treat, blended seamlessly into some really good, high-quality food, what would that experience truly be like then? Of course, the result, regardless of whether it is considered good food or bad food, the moment it enters your body, the profound and unimaginable pain that this particular poison will inevitably bring to you is truly immense and deeply impactful. In precisely the same way, there are many other significant things in this world that we need to counteract because their underlying causes seem especially terrifying, and they also appear very frightening and unsettling. However, in actual fact, these challenging issues can also be effectively eliminated. But as for attachment, its outward appearance is incredibly gentle and deceptively harmless. So you truly have absolutely no idea just how terrifying and dangerous it actually is in reality. Wasn't there a famous singer named Li Na in the past who famously sang the song "Women Are Tigers"? She became incredibly famous as a result of that song. The origin of the song is a story from Han region. There was once an old monk living on a mountain who raised a disciple. This young disciple had never before seen the outside world and had only ever grown up within the serene mountains. One particular time, the young monk urgently needed to go into the bustling city. Then the wise old monk carefully told him, "If you want to go, that's fine, but there's a tigress in the city. She's especially frightening." He described it to him in great detail, explaining everything thoroughly. The young monk said, "I've remembered everything you said." Then he went down into the bustling city below. When he came back, the old monk asked, "How did you feel about your trip to the city today?" He said, "That tigress you mentioned, she was actually really quite cute, not scary at all, really quite cute." So this particular story, later on, it seems things just turned out this way. So when it comes to greed, whether it's a tigress or any other fierce and powerful tiger, it may seem quite scary on the surface, but in reality, it also has its own unique cute side. However, in fact, this great cuteness actually brings you much suffering. Just like what Master Lianqi mentioned earlier, poison hidden in something especially delicious and poison hidden in something especially unpalatable, we might simply reject food that tastes really bad. It's easy to give it up since it's not tasty to begin with. This includes things like killing or smoking, which also seem rather crude and not very good. But when it comes to so-called love, or any kind of attachment, it truly seems like it should bring us something incredibly wonderful and deeply satisfying. However, as we continue to experience and taste it, in the end, wow, we realize that it really is indeed the most truly terrifying of all creatures. At that point, even if you try to escape, you might find you can't get away. So this particular phenomenon, whether it specifically happens to men or women, especially when it comes to financial matters, money is also particularly and profoundly frightening. Nowadays, many officials, whether they've been brought down or sent to prison at first when they truly see money and significant wealth, it seems so appealing. Like, wow, this is great, I want to accept it. But after accepting it, it's just like we mentioned earlier. Money, Buddha saw it as something to be treated like a poisonous snake. So in this world, we certainly do need the fundamental basics for our daily living. That's absolutely true. But beyond that, having an excessive amount might actually bring us this kind of suffering. Yesterday, I gave each of you a string of amber prayer beads. At first, I actually thought, these are yellow. And yellow represents the increased activity among pacifying, enriching, magnetizing, and subjugating. It helps you increase a lot. But then I thought I mustn't use this to help you all get rich. If you get rich, your spiritual practice will definitely be truly ruined. So in the end, I made my own wish myself, hoping to increase wisdom. Because for a practitioner, when it actually comes to wealth, unless you have truly very strong right view and mindfulness, unwavering spiritual motivation, and are truly not tempted by external wealth, maybe then you can truly maintain your spiritual motivation. But otherwise, if you happen to, for example, in your daily life, have a great deal of gurum, which means money, then it's rather uncertain, I don't know, whether you'll be able to handle it, right? Now it seems that many Han people as well, even those individuals who may not comprehend a single word of the Tibetan language, they are familiar with the word gurum. Similarly, even people who are completely unaware of what Zanba actually is, they still truly know what the word gurum actually means. So the inherent power of gurum is still quite significant indeed. So how exactly should I put it then? More verses to go. Wow, that's a lot. Those free from attachment live in peace and joy without suffering. Therefore, one seeks to leave behind the defilements of the world and ultimately does not give rise to attachment or affection. So, as for this part, because the previous verse, it seems that several important verses are being represented here. Earlier, there should have been exactly 6 verses, right? Which specific ones were they? Yes, earlier it was clearly stated that the Brahmin respectfully asked the Buddha Gautama. As for this, the Buddha was addressing the following. He was speaking about all 6 verses together. I forgot to mention that earlier. As for the previous verse, starting from the earlier verses, the following 6 verses do not have any stories or specific cases that are included within Jikai's detailed commentary. And here it says, the main point is to guide the Brahmins, explaining that all worldly attachments and desires should be abandoned. This is the principle being discussed. So in this world, those people who truly don't have strong attachments, if there were absolutely no people in the entire world with any attachments whatsoever, then there would undoubtedly be complete peace and true happiness. Such a person would not be particularly attached to love. This is the kind of person we're talking about. Of course, such a person would also have no hatred. Perhaps a person like this would be at peace and happy. They would have absolutely no sorrow, no afflictions whatsoever, and should be very joyful indeed. So, what do they truly seek? They long to be completely free from the dusty desires of this present world. This dust is certainly not the common dust on the ground, but the dust of afflictions, the defilements. This is what it means. So, such a person would never give rise to attachment or clinging. They have completely severed it. If one is not particularly attached to love, then this strong attachment to love is entirely cut off. Never give rise means at any given time, whether externally or internally, whether in movement or in stillness, whether entering meditation or coming out of meditation, they always remain free from attachment to love. How exactly should this be explained? It means completely severing the fleeting pleasure that comes from worldly love. In fact, deep attachment to love is also a kind of deluded state of mind, though worldly people tend to glorify and romanticize it. If you just change your approach a little, it won't be so painful. I think it was more than 20 years ago when I was teaching the 400 stanzas on the middle way. I remember it should have been Khenpo Acho's commentary, along with Aryadeva's explanation of the 400 stanzas on the middle way. I recall there was a story in it, though I don't remember it very clearly now, but the gist was that there was a powerful king who loved his son very much, loved him deeply, but later, when impermanence suddenly struck, the son died tragically. That was roughly the plot, I think. After his death, the ministers and the people under the king were afraid the king wouldn't be able to handle it, that he might indeed die as well, or something like that. So they went to the king and told him something in a very skillful and delicate way. They said,
Your beloved son has become quite stiff, indeed rigid. But stiff has two meanings, at least in the translation at the time. One meaning is rebellion, to revolt, and the other meaning is indeed a very real death. So what did the king first hear when they said, your son has become stiff? And he thought to himself, wow, his very own son is already trying to seize my royal throne. He truly and deeply believed his son had utterly betrayed him. He immediately ordered his army to be prepared to kill him. He hated him intensely, even though it was his own son. Just hearing that he had become stiff, he thought his son had rebelled and become his bitter enemy. He was deeply afraid his son would seize his royal throne, so he hated him profoundly. At this point, the minister said, we are preparing to use the army to deal with your son. The one who just rebelled has already been killed. After he was tragically killed, the king was exceedingly happy. He immediately began to beat drums and loudly struck gongs, and subsequently held a grand celebration. But in reality, his son was still the same son as before. It was just a matter of words. At first he thought of his son as the son he loved dearly. He was very attached to him. If you spoke to him like this, the king might be profoundly heartbroken. But as soon as you say he rebelled against you, that he tried to seize your throne, he immediately feels anger and hatred toward him. So-called love at its core is selfish. Just look at the king's great love for his son. Once that love comes into conflict, like when his son tries to seize the throne or kill him, he immediately sees him as an enemy. And when you see someone as enemy, you don't like them at all. A lot of things in the world today actually really, including people who get divorced, or various sorts of other situations, are exactly the same. When you like someone, you're extremely attached to them. But once impermanence appears, you don't like them anymore. Some people even, for example, some people who used to, let's say two people used to get along well, but later on when things aren't so good between them. I once just very recently met someone who said he really disliked the UK. He had no good feelings toward the whole country. And he especially hated the UK. I asked him why. He said because when he was there, he once fell in love with someone. Later, she betrayed him, so he had no good feelings toward the whole UK. I said, not all British people betrayed you. What does this have to do with the place? What does it have to do with the whole country? But this so-called ignorance, this kind of attachment, is truly quite strange. From the objective perspective of a truly normal person, it's indeed very odd. Your attachment to a certain person, you have a nightmare and think that's the reason. And then you develop this special attachment toward an entire country and so many people. So in terms of worldly logic, love is indeed a particularly unreal kind of discrimination, a truly unique and profound form of distinction. But people won't understand this kind of reasoning. So for this kind of reasoning, I'm not sure how to express it in words. In reality, perhaps in the states of great monks and accomplished masters, there is no such attachment, but sometimes it seems that even great monks and masters have it too. Looking at the biography of Vaisakhinie, she often went through excruciating agony, suffering so intensely it was like being torn between life and death. She also suffered greatly because of her attachment to love, including in the term revealed by the great Totan Gewa Jangchup. In the secret biography of Yeshe Tsogyal, revealed by him in the end, when Guru Padmasambhava went to the southwestern land of the Rakshasas. She suffered tremendously indeed. She desperately pulled at her hair and violently clawed at her chest in utter despair. Just like how we usually feel, Yeshe Tsogyal was so remarkable, the principal holder of so many termas, truly extraordinary. But in that biography it says that in the end, I think there is also a Chinese version of this, published quite early on by Gansu Publishing House and others. She suffered immensely. And later she cried out loudly, calling and praying, going through agonizing suffering in that place, her body tossing and turning incessantly, constantly in pain. Later, Guru Padmasambhava appeared to her through rays of light several times. And then it seemingly appears they had a certain, something called the secret mandala of the guru, something very much like that, which is kind of like how we add each other on WeChat nowadays, for example. So she could communicate with Guru Rinpoche 6 times a day when she was in such a state. On the surface, it seemed that Yeshe Tsogye's mind had calmed down, and she could truly chat with her guru. Her profound level of realization allowed her to connect and communicate. She had such abilities. So perhaps this is not the ultimate meaning, but rather what is manifested in front of sentient beings. But in fact, for a truly great accomplished master, just like we see in the biography of Milarepa, the love and hatred he once deeply felt in his heart, which were quite coarse and truly intense, but later, when he genuinely attained realization, even the sound of his sisters crying and Milarepa's laughter, when they actually mixed together in a cave, they turned into another kind of sound, echoing and drifting, described in his songs of realization. For great masters and accomplished practitioners, they simply do not have this attachment. Having no attachment is best. If one does not give rise to attachment, one attains the highest peace. If there is indeed no such worldly love, one attains a truly highest kind of tranquility, or indeed the greatest happiness. If one does not see one's love, there is no suffering. The same goes for not seeing that which one does not love. Do not encounter what you deeply love, nor what you intensely dislike or do not love at all. What he profoundly means here is that not seeing or being separated from what you truly love brings about immense suffering and emotional pain, and seeing what you do not love also brings suffering in the same way. So, do not encounter what you deeply love, and do not encounter what you do absolutely not love either. Here, he is saying, this is mainly a profound teaching specifically for the ancient Brahmins, meant to cut off such attachment and craving. This verse is spoken to eliminate attachment and craving. The meaning is that not seeing what you love is what we often refer to as the suffering of not getting what one desires, or the suffering of separation from what one loves. Not being able to see the person you love is also very painful. It feels like every day drags on like a year. If it's someone you like, even just one day without seeing them, one day without communicating, you feel extremely sad, anxious, and deeply in pain. Whether it's a beloved person or a precious thing you love that you simply can't see anymore. For example, if you can't find your phone anywhere, or you can't find your computer, in such cases, it's especially painful. You might even lose sleep over it. Whether it's the person you love or the things you love, or for some people they are very extremely attached to any of their personal belongings with a very especially strong sense of clinging. And in this case they also suffer a lot. If on the other hand you encounter someone you don't love, someone you really dislike, maybe someone you used to like but no longer do, or even your enemy. If the thing you dislike most is placed right next to you, then you might feel truly and very unhappy. And this also quite brings about suffering in the same way. Whether it's an enemy you resent or people you have a bad relationship with, if you have to live together with them, it is also very uncomfortable. For example, if you live with someone you like, no matter how much time truly passes, it always feels so very especially fleeting indeed. If it's someone you don't love or even hate, and you have to be together, that is also extremely painful. Both of these situations, when it comes to love, being with someone you truly don't love is very much suffering, and not having the person you love is also suffering indeed. So here, often in our daily lives, we really shouldn't always expect to meet the people we truly love either. This includes your relatives, your parents. Even being together with them for a long time can be painful. Nor should you ever expect to encounter people whom you truly do not love, such as your personal enemies or direct adversaries, who always bring you trouble. This is mainly not present in this context. However, in some other significant Buddhist scriptures, it is indeed clearly mentioned and documented. For example, there were 2 individuals at that particular time who were especially fond of each other, sharing a deep affection. Later, they eventually ended up living apart, and they regularly kept in touch through written letters. Later on, perhaps that particular man, whenever he frequently encountered the person he deeply admired, she would invariably bring along someone who was undeniably their sworn family enemy, causing considerable tension and discomfort. She would always bring them along with her, so his emotions became quite complicated. On one hand, he got to see the person he liked, but on the other hand, she would also bring someone he disliked. Our interpersonal relationships are a bit complicated. He'd end up seeing people he resented with her. So when he saw them, it was hard for him to make a choice. And it wasn't just once, this happened often with that person. Maybe even if he told her, she wouldn't listen. Every time he saw the person he liked, he would be happy. But when the person he disliked came along, he would be unhappy again. So it was really hard to analyze the pain and happiness he felt. Eventually, he stopped seeing her. Later, he eventually decided to become a Buddhist monk. That's indeed the idea here. His complicated circumstances constantly entangled him, causing great pain. This is mentioned in the Chuyao Jing Udāna Varga. There's another story as well. There was a man, and it was his son, or rather it should be his son. His son was taken away by a Rakshasa, demon. After his son was taken, some time passed. He was very sad and in great pain. His son had been abducted. But then his beloved son was brought back. After his dear son was returned, he was very happy and joyful again. But after a little while, he started worrying about the Rakshasa once more. The Rakshasa did it on purpose. It's just like how some fledgling birds snatch other animals now. She did this on purpose to bring such feelings to people. After some time passed, she would bring his son back again. Then after a while, she would abduct him again. She kept repeating this over and over. At that time, his emotions were very complicated. Sometimes he was extremely happy, and sometimes he was truly in deep pain. He didn't know what to do. Eventually, he left that kind of life behind. He decided to become a monk himself. After he became a monk, the Buddha, in response to these two incidents, spoke this verse. In fact, as long as we have attachment to love, it's not good to have it, and it's not good not to have it. Both are problematic. As we just mentioned before, indeed, separation from loved ones or not getting what we seek, these kinds of suffering, and later the people we dislike, our enemies, and those we hate, if we have to interact with them often, this is called the suffering of being together with those we resent and hate. So as long as you have strong attachment to someone or something, behind it there will definitely be pain, anxiety, and fear. These emotions are certain to exist. Therefore, the Buddha teaches here that if we want to adjust our emotions in a meaningful way and attain tranquility, we not have people we are especially attached to. If there are people we love especially, today we love, tomorrow we hate, the next day we may fear, and so on. All sorts of complex emotions will also arise. Nor harbor anger towards our enemies or disliked people. Having excessive anger and regret towards them will otherwise also bring you a great deal of suffering. So both of these are indeed truly significant faults. Therefore, in order to eliminate both of these problems, this particular verse was taught. Next then. Being separated from those we deeply love and encountering those individuals we truly dislike can indeed make us grow old and give rise to truly unbearable suffering. This is precisely like what happened in Shravasti, or perhaps in another similar location, where a Brahmin had a beloved daughter who fell deeply in love with one of his devoted disciples. They developed mutual affection for each other. When such love arises, it becomes extremely intense. They were especially unwilling to be apart from each other, and even just to embrace each other. They were willing to sacrifice everything. For the sake of such love, in the end they gradually experienced aging and unbearable suffering. It is for this profound reason that the Buddha spoke this significant verse. The true meaning is that being truly separated from those we deeply love is also extremely painful. Because for someone, being truly separated from the one they very much love is indeed also unbearable. Even people in the world today, when it truly comes to people or cherished things they like, the profound pain of parting from them is hard to put into words. And as for those we do not love, just like what was mentioned earlier, whether they are enemies or people we simply don't like, nowadays some young people say, I don't like this workplace. They change jobs, dislike the new workplace, dislike this person. Some people have issues with their own mindset. To them, all the people and things in the world are things they constantly want to change. This indicates bad spiritual practice. For those who practice well wherever they live, just like many great masters in the past, people with good practice can be at ease anywhere. Now, some of us may, in fact, actually not necessarily be talking about relationships with the opposite sex, but rather about being especially picky, about those who are always finding faults, which shows that their inner spiritual level is probably quite limited. True practitioners, wherever they may go, are truly happy. For example, when we stay at a comfortable hotel or a cozy inn, wherever we travel, it still feels quite good and pleasant. We can basically accept it without much hesitation. Whatever food we eat, it's all fine. And whatever transportation, it's fine. Some people, not to be picky at all, this is spiritual attainment. Some people, towards those around them or towards things or anything at all, they just can't stand it, can't listen to it, and find it especially annoying. Actually, this is really a psychological problem. Truly, if our spiritual level is high in our practice, then it seems that in any situation, truly, we can easily go along with others. This is also somewhat related to both love and hate. So if your state of mind is not very good, what kind of eventual result will that truly lead to? Because there is a strong emotional attachment in their heart, and they simply can't get what they desire. At this point, it's like a withered reed under the sun, eventually withering away, ultimately never satisfied. And over time, they themselves slowly grow old. Some people come from troubled families yesterday, or was it some other time? I'm not sure if I mentioned it. Today they interviewed me. Maybe I just mentioned it at that time, or maybe I said it in class before. There was a woman who brought her daughter with her. She was quite extremely thin, more than usual. Then she broke down and cried very sadly. I asked her why. She said it was really because of her husband. He has all kinds of situations going on quite often outside. So now she is thinking about suicide, but she can't do it. She hasn't succeeded. She seemed extremely, extremely heartbroken. I saw her little girl. She would glance at her mother's tears from time to time and then go back to playing on her phone. Many kids are like that. She didn't want to think about anything else. As long as she had a phone, she'd start playing with it. Every now and then she'd look at her mother. Her mother was in deep pain. She said she couldn't eat at all during the day and couldn't sleep at night. She would go whole nights without sleeping. I said, the world is so vast. See if you can truly let go of these emotional attachments. Although I genuinely meant well when I originally said this to you, it unfortunately seemed like it didn't really help at all. Indeed, when it comes to us ordinary people, if we become fixated on something, whether it's feelings, status, or wealth, if we are especially attached to it, the suffering is unbearable. It brings deep sadness and anxiety. In the end, you might even experience while alive the pain of the hell and hungry ghost realms. It really does seem terrible. She experiences this kind of unbearable pain. But on the other hand, for many people across the world, they might genuinely see it as something especially noble and profoundly significant. Just like Liang Shambo and Zhu Yingtai in the past, their story, it's highly praised. It's considered truly great. If in the end the two of them actually turn into beautiful butterflies, then it's seen as worthwhile. There are many such examples in the world, including in the West, like Romeo and Juliet, right? Their story was originally a story by Shakespeare. This is something common in the West. It's said to be a truly great story. And this kind of fictional story has ultimately become people's values. This kind of fictional attachment, this painful union, this painful false union, in the end, all of it has become, whether it's in movies or on TV, people see it as especially worthy of praise. And then under its influence, who knows how many people have found happiness or experienced suffering because of it. I can't really say for sure. So in today's world, for those of us studying Buddhist logic and those who study profound Buddhist teachings, we should use wisdom to examine what the world praises is worthy. If it is worthy, then it's fine to praise it in different languages. But if it's not worthy, even though we may not have the ability to refute their views, it's not necessarily required either. However, in our own practice, we should choose for ourselves the most meaningful values. This is absolutely, truly very good. All right, we'll stop here for today.
Om Padma Sodargye. Aham Padma Sodargye.